Trust. It's vital to any lasting relationship. When you trust someone with your whole heart, you're giving them everything and taking your chances with love. But building trust takes time. And if you trust too quickly, it may just backfire, sending you speeding into a nightmare you can't escape. Before you know it, your relationship has collapsed in on itself, leaving you in the dust. January 19th, 2010. It's 2 a.m. in downtown Atlanta. The sun is down, but the city is alive.
Atlanta is always awake. Atlanta is a city that never stops.
Over on the northwest side of town, 22-year-old Max Turner and his friend, Reese Shaw, are walking their dates to the train station after a night of partying.
The group was flirty and laughing and having a good time.
But soon, the jovial evening would be turned on its head.
An SUV pulls up right next to them.
All of a sudden, two armed gunmen jump out and hold the group up at gunpoint.
The assailants demanded everything: keys, wallet, valuables.
Everybody's frantic, they're panicking. It went from a double date to a robbery.
In the chaos, Max shoves past the gunman and tells the others to run.
All of a sudden he hears bang, 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 bang.
He is terrified. He is literally running for his life.
Max is able to take cover behind a nearby building, but he sees that his friend Reese isn't as lucky.
He sees that Reese is on the ground. He's being beaten to a pulp.
That's when Max notices something that makes his jaw drop.
He sees his dates in the vehicle of the suspects that had just robbed them.
He knows in that moment that they were absolutely set up.
Suddenly, Max sees the gunman rush to the vehicle and the foursome flees the scene. When the coast is clear, Max races to his friend's aid.
He realizes that these injuries are really bad. He doesn't know if he's gonna live or die.
Soon, police will not only find themselves chasing the brazen foursome, but chasing the truth, where one woman must decide just how far her loyalty lies for a man she just met.
I knew I'm about to risk it all for this man.
In 2010, 22-year-old Atlanta newcomer Tiffany Vega was excited for a fresh start.
She's had a tough time in the city of Kissimmee, Florida, where she comes from. So she sees Atlanta as a new opportunity, a new land to start over.
Tiffany got her younger sister, Crystal, to go with her.
Tiffany was ecstatic to start her new journey with her sister by her side.
She saw bright lights, big city, but not only that, she saw an opportunity to really change the course of her life.
She loved fashion. Tiffany had hopes and dreams and aspirations of one day starting her own fashion line.
As Tiffany started her job search in the big city, she never expected to find love. But soon enough, she'd meet someone who would change her life forever.
One afternoon, while waiting at the bus stop, Tiffany was approached by this smooth-talking stranger.
He told her that she was too pretty to be waiting for a bus outside and offered to give her a ride home.
The young man introduced himself as 18-year-old Jerome Davis.
Jerome has all this great energy, and immediately they have this instant attraction.
He was a nice looking dude, muscle bound and little button nose and cute.
They were laughing, they were flirting.
Tiffany accepted Jerome's offer. He dropped her off shortly, and the two spent the rest of the afternoon texting each other.
He made me smile anytime I got a text message from him. It made me feel great.
Jerome was extremely attentive. I mean, text messages back and forth, just really lovey-dovey stuff.
It really just creates this connection between the two. They feel they both understand each other.
The next day, the connection between Tiffany and Jerome went beyond texts and straight to the bedroom.
The kisses will melt you. That's what happened. The kisses melted me.
Here you have this extreme chemistry between two individuals.
She fell hard, and it was fast.
Over the next few days, the romance between the two continued to blossom, and Tiffany felt like she'd hit the jackpot.
For the first time, Tiffany had somebody catering to her. Jerome would cook for her, pay her attention, spend that quality time. She felt special.
He was a real gentleman. That was one of the best things about him.
Jerome had even asked Tiffany to move in with him.
Within a week, she found herself moving into her new man's house, ready to start their lives together.
He was something like my grandma was telling me that what a man is supposed to be. So I never would have thought at the end that it would be the way it was.
January 19th, 2010, downtown Atlanta. Police have just arrived on the scene of a violent armed robbery, where victim Reese Shaw has been brutally beaten.
One of the officers, he'd go over there to tend to Reese until the EMTs were able to arrive.
Thankfully, it doesn't seem that his injuries are life-threatening.
With an ambulance en route and a bolo issued for the perp's dark SUV, officers speak to the other victim, 22-year-old Max Turner.
Max tells police they were on a double date at the time when, out of nowhere, two men came out with guns.
He was actually still in shock. He really couldn't believe that this had actually happened to him.
Max says he's sure their dates knew the male assailants.
Max tells the police the girls were on it. This was a setup from the beginning.
He sees his SUV and the two sisters that they had been on a date with earlier that night were in the back.
But before police can continue their conversation with Max, they receive word that their perps might just be within their clutches.
A beat cop happened to see the bolo and then quickly identify the suspected vehicle.
A high-speed chase of 120 miles per hour is ensued. SUV.
But soon, she would find out her whirlwind romance was destined for trouble.
I'm not knowing. I'm about to make a bad decision that's about to affect me for the rest of my life.
January 19th, 2010, 2:30 a.m. Atlanta police are in pursuit of a dark-colored SUV that's been implicated in a violent armed robbery.
It's a full-blown high-speed chase, a very dangerous situation.
But just as quickly as it started, the speeding vehicle is stopped in its tracks.
Anti-lock brakes, hit, car spins completely out of control, and then they hit a telephone pole.
The four assailants get out of the vehicle and run.
So the two girls take off. One of the males comes around from behind the car and is running behind the two young ladies.
The driver ran the complete opposite direction.
Police are out in this foot chase pursuing these suspects.
As officers close in, one of the male assailants collides with the females.
The front passenger, he actually trips him.
I went down, straight on my knees, bust my knees open, I'm bleeding.
Police continue their pursuit of the male assailants, while the two women are apprehended. The women identify themselves as Tiffany and Crystal Vega. As the officers check them for weapons, they immediately find a firearm.
They find a gun on Tiffany. In the process of that male suspect knocking her to the ground, the gun landed underneath Tiffany.
I never realized I was even laying on the gun. Not until the police actually picked me up is when I realized there was a gun there.
Tiffany is adamant the weapon doesn't belong to her.
My first instinct was to tell them, that is not mine. I never touched that.
Regardless, officers prepare to take Tiffany and Crystal back to the station. And just minutes later, their colleagues apprehend the male suspect who escaped after colliding with the two sisters.
He's identified as 19-year-old Malcolm McClarty.
But where was the driver of the vehicle?
The police cannot find him anywhere. So their only hopes are to take the three suspects down to the station and hope that one of them cracks.
As Tiffany Vega, Crystal Vega, and Malcolm McClarty are booked into the Fulton County Jail, Atlanta detectives arrive at a local hospital to speak with the victims of the robbery, 22-year-old Max Turner and 20-year-old Reese Shaw.
Reese took a pretty brutal beating, but the doctors were able to stabilize him.
Detectives ask Max and Reese to start from the beginning. Max says it all started when he met Tiffany on a dating website.
He actually invited me to come over and hang out.
Tiffany ended up bringing her sister, Crystal, who hit it off with Reese.
Max and Reese is having a great time with the young ladies. They're basically having a kickback at his house.
Just before 2 a.m., the girls said they needed to head home, but were worried about walking to the train station by themselves.
Max and Reese decided that they would walk them out.
It was getting real late, so the gentleman thing to do was to walk the young ladies to the MARTA station.
Max says he and Reese never could have expected what happened next.
All of a sudden, these guys are rough, they're aggressive, they're yelling, they're shouting.
In the middle of all this chaos, Max was able to get away,
Max said one of the men fired a gun at him.
but when Reese tried to run, he was grabbed by one of the men and knocked down to the ground.
Reese tells detectives he was terrified as the man began rifling through his pockets.
The guy took his phone and his wallet from his pockets.
Reese says he then tried to get up, but his attempt to escape only escalated the situation.
That's when the beating happened.
He said that after the first few blows, everything else was a blur from there.
Detectives thank the two victims for their time and head back to the station to interview Tiffany, Crystal, and Malcolm. They're hoping they can get at least one of the perps to come clean and help nab the fourth assailant. But it'll be easier said than done.
My whole concept was he riding for me, so I might as well keep my loyalty to him. Whatever he asks.
Atlanta detectives are investigating a violent armed robbery against two young men that left one of them hospitalized.
They're walking their dates down to the bus stop. All of a sudden, in the SUV, pulls up. Two men jump out with guns.
One of the victims, Max Turner, was shot at as he tried to run away from the robbers. The other, Reese Shaw, he was beaten and robbed.
And according to Max, their dates were in on the whole thing.
Max sees these two young women getting in this car with the assailants.
Fortunately, police now have 3 of the 4 suspects in custody: Tiffany Vega, Crystal Vega, and Malcolm McClarty. But a 4th suspect, the second assailant who had also been driving the vehicle, is still on the lam.
The 4th suspect has vanished into thin air.
After speaking with the victims at the hospital, Detectives head back to the station to begin interviewing their perps. They begin with 22-year-old Tiffany Vega.
Tiffany was found with the gun, which made her look bad.
Max has identified Tiffany as the one who set up the date.
Detectives present Tiffany with the statements from Max and Reese.
Detectives now tell Tiffany the victims have identified you as being along with the other assailants running away in that SUV. You were found with the gun. We have all of these connections, Tiffany.
Detectives also confront Tiffany with photos of evidence police confiscated from the SUV, Reese's cell phone and wallet.
At this point, Tiffany is starting to feel the walls caving in. She doesn't know how she's going to get out of this.
I was just angry and frustrated and scared.
Detectives ask Tiffany who the fourth assailant is, the one driving the car.
Investigators are telling her that she will do jail time if she doesn't give up more information. They're hoping that this is what's going to be the breaking point for her.
But to their surprise, Tiffany remains steadfast.
I said, well, I don't know what you're talking about.
No matter what kind of questions they asked her, what kind of variations, what kind of promises, she would not give up any information.
To detectives, it's clear Tiffany is going to do whatever it takes to protect the fourth suspect.
All she has to do is cooperate with the police, and yet all she cares about is protecting him, making sure that he doesn't get caught up in this.
Getting nowhere with Tiffany, detectives decide to cut their losses and move on to their other suspects. But Crystal Vega and Malcolm McClarty are just as tight-lipped.
No one was talking.
Even though their fourth suspect is still a mystery, police move forward with charging the other three.
They were charged with armed robbery, felony aggravated assault.
Tiffany was also charged with possession of a firearm.
Detectives hope that in the months awaiting trial, they'll be able to nab the missing assailant one way or another.
At this point, it's like a cat and mouse game, but they would have to work different angles to try to find more information.
As Tiffany, Crystal, and Malcolm await trial, detectives begin monitoring their phone calls, hoping one of them will trip up and speak to their accomplice.
They listen for certain things, looking for a big fat red flag.
And soon, police would get the lead they were hoping for.
He continued to answer the phone. He keeps telling me he loves me and cares for me.
She would fall on the sword for her man.
January 2010. Atlanta police have Tiffany Vega and her sister Crystal, along with Malcolm McClarty, in custody for an armed robbery that terrorized two innocent men.
The victims thought they were on a double date with Tiffany and Crystal, but it turns out they were just being set up to be robbed.
While the victims survived and have been able to identify the three assailants in custody, the driver of the vehicle is still in the wind. And unfortunately, the three in custody aren't talking.
They pressed and they pressed, but they were not budging.
Detectives have begun listening in on their suspects' phone calls, hoping one of them will make contact with the fourth assailant. And it isn't long before Tiffany Vega's phone calls give them pause.
The entire first or 2 months, Jerome spoke to me all the time.
Tiffany and Jerome were talking a lot, so that gave them reason to believe that they were dating.
Many of the calls are romantic in nature, but that's not all.
They were talking as if he owed her for something, which seems suspicious to detectives.
He told me he loved me. He would make sure that he would file my taxes, and I explained to him to split the money up and put on me and my sister's books.
When detectives look into Jerome Davis's background, They become even more suspicious that he could be the missing assailant.
What police discover is Jerome has a pretty long rap sheet.
His crimes include assault and battery, so given his violent past, they wouldn't put it past him that he could be involved in this.
However, detectives need more concrete proof before they make a move on him. And unfortunately, the victims never got a good look at the fourth assailant.
The victims were able to identify Tiffany and Krista Vega and Malcolm McClurdy, but cannot identify the driver.
You couldn't connect Jerome to anything. There's no fingerprints. There was nothing really linking him to the crime.
Detectives continue to monitor Tiffany's phone calls, hoping she will slip up and implicate Jerome in the crime. But the couple is taking their precautions.
So because the phone calls are recorded in the jail, we never spoke about how he got away. He asked me how I was doing. I asked him, was he making any moves to help me? Those were the kind of conversations that we were having. We never discussed anything about the crime or anything.
To detectives, it seems Tiffany still believes her man can save her from the outside.
I think what she initially thought was, oh, he loves me, he's gonna take care of me, I'll be quiet because this is what you do for people you care about.
She's still holding on to that hope that the man that was loyal, devoted, loved her for who she was going to be out there fighting for her.
But as the months wear on, detectives notice Jerome has gone AWOL.
He stopped calling her, stopped answering her calls, and stopped putting money on the books for her and her sister.
Tiffany seems crushed.
At this point, I'm just adapting. I'm concerned about my sister. I don't see nothing happening on Jerome's end. So being that he's not doing anything, now I'm like, okay, you say you love me, but I don't see it.
She was really starting to feel the weight that this relationship may not have been what she thought it was.
Detectives wonder if this is their chance, a chink in the couple's armor. In August 2010, 7 months after the armed robbery took place, they sit down again with Tiffany.
At that point now I'm angry. At that point I'm mad and sad at the same time.
Detectives tell Tiffany their theory, that the fourth individual, the driver in the crime, was her boyfriend, Jerome Davis.
If he was her boyfriend, it would explain why she was trying to protect him.
Detectives tell her they know he's not calling her anymore and he's no longer putting any money on her books.
They also pull out a shocking piece of information that they'd only just recently discovered. One that detectives feel confident will get Tiffany to turn on her man.
Jerome has a new girlfriend now. So that's why he stopped calling her, stopped reaching out.
That crushed my soul, to think that somebody cared about you and they walked away freely from something that you all were a part of and just left, the three of us left to serve time while he was home chilling at his new girlfriend's house.
Detectives' hunch was correct. Now, a heartbroken Tiffany is ready to tell all.
I'm not trying to protect him any longer. I can't protect him any longer because that ain't real love.
You have Tiffany now having this massive moment of reflection where she realized she's been used.
So now Tiffany is about to spill everything.
2010, after 7 months of investigation, Atlanta police are on the brink of nabbing the fourth assailant involved in a violent armed robbery. 18-year-old Jerome Davis.
Jerome was the boyfriend of one of the women they had in custody, Tiffany Vega.
Police suspected that he was the fourth assailant after numerous jail calls with Tiffany, but they needed proof to secure a warrant.
Initially, Tiffany refused to cooperate with police and was doing everything in her power to protect her man. But now the detectives have provided proof of Jerome and his new girlfriend. A heartbroken Tiffany is ready to tell all.
I was super depressed. He dragged me into this. And now I have to do what's right.
Tiffany says it all started on the night of January 18th, when she and Jerome had only been dating for 1 week.
It was hard for them to make ends meet.
We were not doing well financially. So he said, I got a way. We just need some people to rob. And I'll say, I never did that before, I've never actually taken from somebody.
Tiffany tells detectives Jerome assured her it would be fine.
And he was like, all you gotta do is find someone, I'll do the rest.
And eventually, Tiffany caved.
Every doubt that she had, he was like, no, this is for us. This is how we're going to start off our lives. This is how we're going to take on this world.
He riding for me, so I might as well keep my loyalty to him. He's the only person looking out for me. The only person I got right now besides my sister that understands me, so whatever he asking me to do, I'm gonna do it.
Tiffany explains Jerome showed her how to log onto a chat room to look for a victim.
At this point, she meets this guy, Max.
We got some guys off the chat line that kept wanting to talk to us, and that's what we did. We made a decision to take whatever they had.
Tiffany recounts how Jerome helped calm her fears prior to leaving.
Jerome handed her a burner phone to contact them so that they couldn't be traced back from police to them.
Jerome also told her that he had a car that they could use to stay off the radar. He assured her that it was a foolproof plan.
I just thought that maybe he borrowed somebody's car. I don't know, it's stolen.
He coached her on how to behave, how to act, how to talk, how to keep the men interested, how to look at their surroundings.
She hung on Jerome's every word. She was loyal without question. She completely, totally just trusted him.
Tiffany says that night, Jerome and his friend Malcolm drove her and her sister to meet up with Max.
Max responded back. He had a friend with him and asked Tiffany if she had a friend, and that's how Crystal got involved.
While Jerome and Malcolm waited outside for the signal, Tiffany and Crystal tried to play it cool. But Tiffany wasn't expecting as many people to be there.
The house is full of people, and the sisters are getting nervous.
My mind was racing at that time that maybe this ain't the right thing to do. Maybe this is getting too scary for me.
Tiffany says when Max stepped away to grab drinks, she took the opportunity to text Jerome.
I text her, tell him don't come in here because it's people here and I don't want to get caught.
But Jerome was unfazed.
He told the girls to play it cool, flirt a little bit, and lure them outside so that they can get them alone.
Tiffany admits she followed her man's orders.
I said, well, we gotta go because we done stayed too late. They said, okay, we'll walk you to the train station.
She texted Jerome and let him know.
By 2 a.m., the foursome had almost reached the station.
It's really freaking me out that I'm about to do something this serious. Like, I was getting paranoid.
Seconds later, all hell broke loose.
Jerome and Malcolm are aggressively charging at them and holding the group up at gunpoint.
So I literally put my hands up as if I'm getting robbed,
Tiffany confirms that when Max took off running, Malcolm started shooting at him.
I hear gunshot, and now I'm really scared.
Jerome throws Reese to the ground, and Crystal and Tiffany are frozen. They're panicking.
The plan has completely broken down.
Jerome yells at Tiffany, "Hey babe, we gotta go. Gotta get in the car."
My sister has to shake me out of it and run, and tells me to run.
Tiffany says she and Crystal got into the backseat of the SUV as Jerome had instructed and watched the rest of the attack in horror.
She sees Reese start to get up, and Jerome tells Malcolm to handle him, so he starts brutally beating him.
As Malcolm continued to wail on Reese, Jerome got into the SUV with the girls to stash their stolen goods.
So Tiffany asked, "What did you get?" And Jerome said, "Well, a wallet, a cell phone, and $6. Tiffany's stomach dropped. She just realized that she risked it all for $6.
I look at him and say, I ain't made for this type of stuff. This is scary, and I don't want nobody to get hurt. This is not good.
Tiffany says after that, Malcolm got in the SUV, and the four of them fled the scene. The next thing she knew, cops were on their tail.
It didn't take cops long to spot the stolen vehicle after that bolo went out. The car had Ohio tags, and that's kind of rare because you're in Atlanta.
Jerome guns it. The car is speeding uncontrollably.
Tiffany says when Jerome started driving like a madman, she grabbed her sister's hand.
I told her I'm sorry. She's just shaking her head like, I'm gonna get you out of this.
Suddenly, Jerome lost control of the vehicle, and they crashed.
Jerome jumps out of the driver's seat and takes off, leaving them all in the dust.
As Tiffany and her sister follow suit, Malcolm collides with them, tossing the gun.
He shoves Tiffany in the back, and she falls. And as she falls, she lands on the gun.
After 7 long months, Tiffany has finally given detectives the missing piece of this crime. But will Jerome Davis actually end up paying for what he's done? Or will Tiffany have to take the fall?
Jerome was never concerned about her or her best interest. She was just another person that he wanted to use to get what he wanted at that time.
After 7 months, the armed robbery attack on Max Turner and Reese Shaw has finally come full circle.
Detectives finally have enough evidence to arrest the fourth suspect, Jerome Davis, who was the driver that night.
It's all thanks to Jerome's girlfriend and accomplice, Tiffany Vega, who has agreed to cooperate with police in their efforts to bring down her man.
Jerome had betrayed her. She was willing to not give his name up, and he ultimately abandoned her while she was behind bars.
She felt like she'd been played.
Just hours after Tiffany gives her statement, police arrest Jerome and bring him in for questioning.
Investigators come in, they sit down, they talk with him. You kind of want to gauge to see what his commitment level is to his girl. How much is he willing to let his girl go down for? You know, does he care?
At the mention of Tiffany's name, Jerome says nothing.
At this point, Jerome is emotionless, stoic. He's withdrawn.
He didn't give anything up, really, because he felt like they didn't have anything on him.
Jerome lawyers up and decides to tempt his fate at trial. The other 3, however, choose to take plea deals for their roles in the crime.
We pleaded guilty, and they dropped a lot of the charges down to lesser charges.
Tiffany and her sister Crystal are both sentenced to 10 years behind bars.
I went out and committed a crime. So you reap what you sow. If you go out and do something, there are consequences. But Crystal doesn't do stuff like that, It just wasn't okay for her to get in trouble. It might be the worst mistake of my life.
Malcolm McClarty receives a 20-year sentence.
He still shot at the victim, committed armed robbery, and beat another victim so much that he had to go to the hospital.
By the fall of 2010, Jerome Davis's trial is fast approaching. But everyone is shocked when it suddenly comes to a screeching halt.
The DA comes and sees me and says, I can't use you because you would look like a scorned lover, angry because he has a new girlfriend.
To Tiffany's dismay, Jerome walks away with probation and nothing else.
He never was sentenced to any jail time.
There was nothing really linking him to the crime except for the witness statements by the individuals that were all charged. So he basically almost gets off scot-free.
It's something that happens more than what we are willing to actually acknowledge, that people give themselves to other people to the point of the detriment to themselves.
In 2016, after 5 years in prison, Tiffany is granted early release for good behavior.
I was sentenced to 10 years to serve 6. My sister was sentenced 10 years to serve 4.
Though they lost precious time with their family while behind bars, the sisters tried to grow and learn from their experience.
We were ready to just live a happy life, to live in peace. Serving that time humbled me.
But even after everything that had happened, Jerome still couldn't leave Tiffany alone.
I didn't speak to Jerome till I got out of prison. He texted me and told me to be safe and stay out of trouble. And I told him, why would you even contact me? And those were our last words to each other.
For Tiffany, this is a healthy detachment. This gives her an opportunity to focus on the things that really matter, her family and her goals.
But in June of 2018, Tiffany and her family were dealt another tragic blow.
Crystal was unfortunately a victim of domestic violence. She was shot and killed by her boyfriend during an argument.
I couldn't be there to hold her hand or help her. It wasn't fair to her. It was hard. Real hard.
Today, Tiffany still regrets the crime she took part in and the trust she put in a man she had just met.
I always wanted somebody to protect me, be my knight in shining armor. And he played that role in the beginning so great. So great. But it was just a lie. I was living a lie.
Trust is a valuable currency, and you have to be careful who you give it to. If you're too quick to trust, you're not only risking your own life, but the lives of the ones you love. Before you know it, you could be racing down a dangerous path